Hello, I'm live. Welcome to this week's live. And today I'm going to really be talking about going through some great questions that I've received recently on navigating chronic illness recovery. So I try and answer everyone's messages individually if people comment, but today I thought it would be good to talk about some of these on a live so that everyone can benefit from the insight. So if you have any questions, make sure you post them in the chat and say hi if you're joining me live or watching on the replay, and let me know where you're joining from. And if you've got a question and you're watching it live, just pop it in the chat and I'll answer it later. So the first question that I've been asked recently is, I'm thinking of quitting medical medium. What should I do? And so I guess if this was something that you're dealing with, I'd start with looking at why you're thinking of quitting. And I'm not saying that to say don't quit. What I'm saying is that people often give up for, what they're doing for many different reasons. So if you've been doing it for a while and got to a point where you don't enjoy what you're doing anymore, or you find it stressful, or you've found that it's not working for you, then this is something that really needs a bit more thought. So diet seems to be a really contentious issue in chronic illness recovery, and the only person who can work out what's right for you really is you. So I've made a video about how to choose the right diet for you because of this particular issue, because I've seen people get attacked on social media for saying that a particular way of eating isn't working for them and being told that it's because they're not doing it right. And it's not always the case. So, obviously I can't tell you the right way to eat for you to heal, but because I'm not a nutritionist or anything like that, but I just know from my experience with clients who haven't got anywhere with diet or supplementation that they're generally dealing with chronic stress, either in work or home, or because of their experiences trying to heal. So, it's something to think about. So for any change you plan to make, it makes sense to see if it's in fact the diet that's the problem, or how you're feeling emotionally about it that's where you're getting stuck. So as I said, I've got a video about this which goes into more detail, and I'll put the information in the comments after I put this video live. So I can see there's a couple of people join me on the live stream. If you've just joined me, let me know where you're joining from and say hi, and then I don't feel so lonely here. And of course, if you've got a question, please put them in the chat and I'll be happy to spend some time a bit later in the video answering those. So another question that I get, which is really around diagnosis, and this question that I was asked was particularly related to Ehlers Danlos, but it can relate to anything that you're worried about getting diagnosed for. So it can be applied to any condition. So one of the reasons I find that people fear diagnosis is because they're afraid of being branded with a label. And that's how I felt about getting diagnosed with chronic fatigue. I was really afraid of it because I'd met quite a few people on my journey who'd been stuck with chronic fatigue for, 5+ years. And even though I knew deep down that was what I was dealing with, it was something that I was terrified of actually having someone else confirm. And what that meant was that, I guess I kind of lived in denial, and the fear of chronic fatigue meant I pushed myself harder, much longer, instead of seeing it really as a sign that my body needed a different approach and a bit more space. So I didn't really change my behavior, and that was actually what I needed to do. And if I compare that with getting diagnosed with Ehlers Danlos, I had no idea what Ehlers Danlos was before I went to see people about the health problems that I was experiencing. So when I got diagnosed and nobody I consulted made a big deal about it, it didn't worry me so much. And it really shows you just the different perspective that can be taken on a diagnosis. So by the time I got diagnosed, I'd lived with the feeling that I was perhaps just a hypochondriac. So it was a relief that I wasn't imagining it. So that's a bit about my experience with, really how getting diagnosed with Ehlers Danlos and chronic fatigue, how they were very different experiences. And I want to say I can understand that being afraid of getting diagnosed with something, I can really understand how people feel like that, because something like Ehlers Danlos can really seem like a life sentence. And I had a friend um, who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she went to the doctor, they diagnosed her, and she said, "Well, I'll come back to you if I need your help, at a later date, but I'm going to see what I can do myself." So that's a really good, um, example of getting the diagnosis and feeling empowered to go and do something yourself. And of course, I'm not saying it's a walk in the park dealing with these conditions. They're really hard, but really it's how we use the information that's important. And as I learned with getting diagnosed with chronic fatigue, it's more of a key than a label. And it's what you do with that diagnosis, because no one else can tell you how to how to take it on board. Only we can decide what that diagnosis means. It's how you emotionally process and how you use it that really defines the impact of it on you. And sometimes getting a diagnosis can be really helpful, particularly for things like Ehlers-Danlos, because I know in my experience prior to getting diagnosed, I spent 2 years with a physio that wasn't right for me. And yet after I got diagnosed, I found specialist physios. Whenever I went to see anyone else, I was able to flag that it was a problem, and it meant I got better treatment. So that's the answer to that question. And I haven't got any questions in the chat yet, so I'll keep going with the other questions that I've got. So I get a lot of EFT questions all the time. And so here's a few of the common ones, and I'll tell you basically how to, navigate these. So somebody asked me, what should I do when I do EFT and tune into my body and emotions and I feel worse? Now, when we start to acknowledge and let ourselves feel those emotions, it can feel intense and overwhelming at times. And when we start to engage with our emotions and acknowledge them using tools like EFT, that intensity can go up. And also dealing with an emotion can really open the door to another emotion making itself known. So one of the contributors to chronic illness is repressed emotions. And in order to move forward, we really need to get used to feeling those emotions and letting them go. And this is why it's so important when you start tapping and acknowledging your feelings that you keep tapping, so that you can send that calming signal to the amygdala, which is part of the emotional and stress center of the brain. And really, EFT is designed to help you ride out that storm. But we need to keep going with it when we feel the intensity. A lot of people sort of go, "Oh, I can't feel that," and then they repress again, and that's a missed opportunity for actually releasing it. So really the best way to reap the rewards of EFT is to go gently and slowly, and when you can cope with it, go deep, and most importantly, as I said, to persevere. So this question is really a great one, and that I got was, tapping exhausts my arms. Is there another way that I can use it? And the answer is absolutely. EFT's strength really lies in its flexibility. So if your arms are tired, then consider finger or wrist tapping. So you can tap around the finger points, or you can tap on your wrist, or you can actually just press two fingers together. So you can go round like that. So that's actually another way that you can tap and get the benefit of the acupressure without having to, tie your arms out. Another powerful way of tapping is using visualization. So once you've got the hang of the points, then you can picture yourself tapping around each of the points. So this is kind of my favorite way of doing it when it's cold and I'm in bed and I don't want to bring my arms out from under the covers and tap. And so because I've tapped so many times, I just close. Well, my eyes will be closed because I'm in bed, hopefully. But just imagine tapping on each of the points without physically doing it. It works. The other thing that you can do is you can tap into the phenomenon of mirror neurons. So absorbing someone else performing the action of tapping can trigger a similar response in your brain because we have these mirror neurons. And so if you watch somebody tapping whilst focusing on your own problem, that can actually help you to, release the problem. So EFT is really customizable and it's flexible, and just find your rhythm with it and make it work for you. You can't really get it wrong. It's just about experimenting. And it's interesting because I know my clients, they are teaching me how to use EFT every day. I'm always learning a different way. One of my clients likes to do EFT in a dark room where there's no lights whatsoever, and she feels that it can help her really become present with her emotions and tune into her body. And I tried it, and it's actually a really cool way of doing it. So that's the answer to that question. So the next question that I've got is, if I do EFT, is that all I need to do to heal? Okay, so right, somebody's watching me from the supermarket. Hi, Victoria. Which was your trigger when you started the emotional healing? How did you end up learning about EFT? Well, that's a really good question. Okay, so emotional trigger. I think at the point that I learnt about EFT, I was in a really, I was at a low point in my life. I'd hit that sort of rock bottom. And so I was feeling a whole host of emotions, and I was in just a state of complete overwhelm and heavy depression. And a friend had mentioned, like, I'd heard about EFT right at the beginning of trying to recover from chronic fatigue, but I didn't use it. I just discounted it because it looked crazy. And so the emotion that I was dealing with was really deep, dark depression and anxiety at this point. Somebody had suggested that I try using positive affirmations and tapping. I didn't really find that useful, but what it did was pique my interest enough to start watching videos on YouTube like the ones I make and just tapping along, but also looking at how I could use it in my everyday life. And that is pretty much how I teach people, is to, bring it in and start using it everywhere. And so it was something I knew about, but I never used. And when I started to use it and started using it consistently, I saw what a difference that it made. So I hope that's answered your question, Victoria. It's a good one. So yeah, keep the questions coming. That's going to help me to know what you want me to talk about. So another question that I've had is, if I do EFT, and enjoy your shopping, if I do EFT, Is that all I need to do to heal? So, recovering from a chronic illness often requires a holistic approach. So, if you think that stress can come in three main forms: physical, emotional, and environmental. So, emotional stress is probably the most common stress that we have. I mean, if you look at since COVID, it's well documented that people's anxiety and depression levels have gone up in many countries because, the world changed fundamentally. So most people with a chronic illness of some kind have chronic stress, and this keeps the nervous system, which the nervous system's like the control center. Well, it's attached to our brain, which is the control center, but it speaks to all the organs in the body. So a lot of us have chronic stress, and this keeps the nervous system in a state of either fight or flight or freeze. And when our nervous system is dysregulated like that, it makes it difficult for our body to maintain that health, and it causes inflammation, and it also downregulates our immune system, which is not really what we need. So when we use tools like EFT, we're able to start working through the emotional stress. We're starting to release those repressed emotions. We're also starting to regulate our emotions and manage stress in a better way, and keep sending that calming signal. But if you're not eating properly, and when I say not eating properly, it could be a diet high in junk that can cause a lot of stress in the body. Your sleep isn't consistently good. You might be drinking coffee or alcohol, or wearing a lot of toxic body products, or missing meals. That's something that gets overlooked a lot. Not only is this going to have an impact on how intensely you feel your emotions, but also how easy it is for you to tolerate the deeper work required to shift emotional stress. It's hard to be regulated and to not feel anxious when your body has other stresses: physical, over exercising, alcohol, coffee. They all add to that stress. So to heal, it's really about focusing on consistency in all areas to support your nervous system to heal, and really starting to acknowledge that emotional stress needs some addressing, and using tools like EFT, but also switching up negative self-talk with tools like brain retraining. Those can be really helpful to get you started. And I find that doing this and some basics around sleep, diet, and relaxation can really help people spend more time in that healing zone. And that's why with clients, I use a mix of life coaching, mind body practices like brain retraining, and energy psychology tools like EFT, really, so that achieving a holistic approach becomes a lot easier for people. So, another question that I've had is, I try to think positively. Why am I not getting better? Now, I've worked with a few clients who've tried techniques like brain retraining and CBAT, my brain, CBT, which emphasize the importance of reframing thoughts from negative to more positive ones, and using tools like visualization, visualizing a positive future. And those can work incredibly well, but the intent of those can be interpreted, or they're just not appropriate for the stage that someone is at. So I'm trained in brain retraining, but I tend to use EFT with many clients when we first get started, because I've seen clients come to me feeling guilty about their thoughts, still dealing with really heavy emotions that it's very difficult to switch out of, but also experiencing trauma that's unresolved. So Or they may have done brain retraining, but it's left them feeling a pressure to think positively in a way that leads them to repress emotions instead. So about 80 to 85% of our thoughts are negative. So it's a pretty tough ask sometimes to always be reframing thoughts. So sometimes, you might feel negative emotions, and it's okay. It's your current truth based on your experience. And sometimes just being okay with the way we feel and allowing ourselves to feel that is a positive thing. But EFT is so great because I'm really a big believer in getting brutally honest with ourselves about what we're feeling. So many of us have learned through our life experiences that our emotions are something that we must keep down, shut down, or that we should fear them. And it's really not helpful for our bodies. So with EFT, we acknowledge how we feel so we can stop the repression of emotions. We give it focus. We tap on acupressure points to take the physical stress out of that emotion. And then what we find when we do that, when we start to regularly, emotionally regulate, then a more sort of general positive thoughts and insights can start to arise on their own. And they do. We start to reframe quite easily. And I'm actually in the process of working on a technique which marries brain retraining and EFT, which I'll share with you once I've got it nailed. So if you're actually, feeling some fear or dread about Christmas, then I've got a live group workshop on the 9th of December, which I'm telling everyone about. And I'm going to be using a mix of techniques like EFT to help you navigate some of the issues that come up at Christmas, being around other people when you're trying to heal a chronic illness. And they're tools that I used when I was trying to heal, and they made being around other people a lot less stressful. So I'm going to put the link in the comments if you're watching on the replay, and I'll put it in the chat towards the end. And I've actually got a Black Friday deal which finishes soon. So if you want to join me, you can use the code THRIVING at the checkout and you'll get 30% off, which is a good chunk. So the other question that I've got is, do I have to work on all my emotional barriers to recover? Because that seems like a huge ask, really. So the short answer is no. Not only would it be impossible, because you're living life and new things are coming up as a result of our ongoing experience. Pardon me, I need to drink. But you'd be overwhelmed if you even tried. And some stuff you need to heal may be inaccessible because it's not safe to feel it yet. Clients come to me, they don't remember anything from childhood. And there's a good reason for that. We don't remember it because it's safer for us not to. Like everything, emotional work is a slow and steady process. But there comes a tipping point when you've worked on enough to sufficiently heal your nervous system so that your body really starts to spend enough time in rest and repair for those health shifts to happen. And that can start quite quickly for some people, and for others take a little bit more time. And I find that by 6 to 8 weeks, most clients are starting to get signs that the body's spending more time in rest and repair. And that could be things like sleep improving. They just feel a bit more calm. That's a great sign that the body's starting to spend more time in rest and repair. It can take a while for the body's healing to start to catch up. But when we start to see those signs, those are the things, if we can keep focusing on those, then we're really going to stay consistent and start to see bigger shifts happening. So from my experience, I spent a year of slowly clearing emotional barriers on my own, traumas, stuck emotions, changing my beliefs. And those improvements really built up over time. And that was enough to keep me feeling encouraged. And for some people, it takes less time. And for others, it can be consistent action over a longer time. And so for example, this year, I've had some health struggles following the death of my father. And so the tools I learnt during recovery come in really handy to help me cope with the ups and downs, because it was very stressful, which is one of the reasons I haven't been around. So the way I think of these things is you're healing not just your body, but you're healing your life so that it sustains your health and happiness for the long term. And these are things that are really worth investing the time and the effort to learn, because if you face another challenge, because we often get sick during times when there's high stress, like I had problems with my back. Having these tools is just like a lifeline so that it doesn't take us right back to where we started. We can actually come out of things very quickly. And actually, when I realized I had an issue, it took me 3 months to get to a point where my health is actually much better than it was before my father died, and I didn't even realize it could be. So if you've got a question, I'm going to wait a couple of minutes, and if you want to pop it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go live again next Saturday. Tapping you, okay. Victoria says, why does the official tapping usually start tapping at the side of the hand while affirming what's bothering you? Okay, that's a good question. So basically, it's called a setup statement, and we tap on the side of the hand to deal with something called reversals, which is basically resistance to the problem. And so there were certain points on our body, like the side of the hand, these points here, which are called the sore spot. They also help us to deal with reversal, but also reversal in our energy system. So tapping generally starts officially on the side of the hand, but there are techniques which I use which you don't need to tap on the side of the hand. I hope that's answered the question. It's it doesn't make a lot of sense, I know, but that's the best I can manage today at 27 minutes into a live. So I hope that's helped. So I'm going to go live again next Saturday, and we're going to talk about a bit more about EFT, but also do some tapping together on shame and guilt, because this is something that people voted for when I asked in a poll, what is it that you're struggling with? And shame and guilt was sort of second to overwhelm, which we covered next week, last week. So I hope you can join me for that. And I'm going to hopefully keep going live into the new year. And this is going to be the main way that I'm turning up on YouTube for a little while, because it's a great way of connecting with you guys, but also, I can spend a bit longer and answer question. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Victoria. I'm glad you were curious. Yes, you were. You're welcome. So, yeah, I hope you can join me. And if you want to join the workshop in December, take advantage of that Black Friday discount, Thriving, at the checkout, which I'll type in there. And I'll post it in the comments. And yeah, thanks so much for joining me. It's lovely to be here with the people that have. Thanks for your questions, and I'll see you next week. Take care. All the best. Bye.